Can we talk a little bit about the writing craft? Just a couple of questions.
Yeah, love to.
Yeah. Okay. So mostly I've been involved with you as a fiction writer, but I first met you as a nonfiction writer. And I didn't meet you, but I met your book out of the blue. This was the first book that I ever read by Jerry Jenkins. And I didn't even realize that it was the same Jerry Jenkins that I now know until after I had been to the writers conference with the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. So do you enjoy as much, which do you enjoy better, the nonfiction or the fiction, or is it just you enjoy what you're doing at the same time?
Well, I used to say that I enjoyed whatever one I was not doing at the time. You know, if I'm writing somebody's biography or if I'm writing a motivational book, I wish I was writing a novel. And then when I'm writing a novel, I wish I was doing the other. But I have to say, if I had to choose, I would just write fiction. It's great fun. Nonfiction has been wonderful because I've met so many interesting people and famous people and find out what they're like behind closed doors. And I do think I learned a knack or a gift for that. In fact, it was the Hershiser book where that came full circle for me, because I had done several sports biographies before that. My background was in sports writing, so I know that world. And I had done books with Hank Aaron, Walter Payton, and Meadowlark Lemon, people like that. But when I did the Hershiser book, somehow everything turned for me, and I realized I need to write this book not as if I were Oral Hershiser and could do all the stuff he does, but if he were me, if he's gotten all the stuff he knows and his family and whatever he's talking about, if he knew how to write and really capture his own voice and get that on paper, that became my goal. So it's for me to really disappear. And you do in a biography anyway. I've had people ask me if I've read biographies that I've written. You know, my name's on them, but they see the other person, which is the point. But I really try to catch his voice and make it sound like him. In fact, there's a funny story associated with that. We were trying to figure out who would be the best to write a foreword for an Oral Hershiser biography. This great, superstar pitcher for the Dodgers. And we were thinking would be a famous ball player who would really know the game, who would, understand what it's all about. And we finally settled on Oral himself would be the best person to write a foreword for his own book. And so obviously I wrote that too, but, after interviewing him. And the funny thing was when people read the book, a lot of them came to Oral and said, after reading that foreword, you could have written this book yourself. As if you didn't have both of it too. But that's what you want. You want to get out of the way and really catch the person's voice to make people feel like they're sitting across from them and hearing them tell their story.
Periodically, I get emails from you that say, what can I help you with in writing? And it's like a little survey. And I think I have to confess that I have not answered that email yet, because every time I get it, I think, okay, what do I really want to know? This more relates to nonfiction, like how you go about interviewing someone and do you follow them around forever, or what is it? What's your process there for a nonfiction book?
Yeah, it's a lot more involved than most people would think. And fortunately for me, a lot of my subjects have been famous people. So the publisher has enough money to give them, to get them to do it, and then to me to write it. And they also will cover, travel and tape transcriptions and things like that. So to give you, for instance, my most recent nonfiction book is called The Matheny Manifesto. And let me show you that one here. This has been on the New York Times bestseller list for almost a year, I think, maybe a little more. And Mike Matheny is a manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's not really a biography. It's a motivational book. It's his view of teamwork and doing things right, doing old-fashioned way. In fact, the subtitle is A Young Manager's Old School Views on Success in Sports and Life. Mm-hmm. And so I had to be with Mike. I was in spring training in Florida. I was on the road with him in Milwaukee when the Cardinals played the Brewers, in New York when they played the Mets, in Chicago when they played the Cubs, and then in St. Louis where they play their home games. So there was a lot of travel. When I interview him, I do interview him on a recorder so that I get every word. And then what you get is a mountain of material. Yeah. And so I would have had probably 6 or 7 times the amount that's in this book in tape transcriptions. And people don't speak chronologically. you try to get it to do it that way. And when I arrange my questions, it helps that I know the game, so I'm not starting as an amateur and saying, "Tell me about baseball," but I can speak his language and know that milieu. But when I'm asking about his past, or how he came to this thought, or how he wants to outline the Matheny Manifesto is actually a letter he wrote to Little League parents telling them that they've got it all wrong, and then here's how to do it. And that letter started getting posted all over the country in dugouts and in gymnasiums and locker rooms. And so that's why he wondered if he had a book. And I saw the letter and said, "You do." And so that's what we talked about. When I get the tape transcriptions back, I send those tapes or recordings to a typist. In incomplete sentences, he's starting over. Something reminds him of something from 20 years ago, and then he comes back to the present. Then he reminds him of something 5 years ago, and it comes back to the present. Now, that would make for a mess of a book. So what I do is I take that transcription and several hundred pages, and it's all double spaced so I can see what's there and work with it. And then I'll get a place as big as maybe a dining room table or a king-size bed, and I get a hard surface with a metal ruler, and I start tearing those pages into little strips just so I can put the whole thing back in chronological order. All the talks I had with him, I'll say, I might have, from your childhood, kindergarten, grammar school, whatever, up through your playing career, high school, college, when you were drafted. And again, I'm not doing his autobiography, but those stories come in as we talk about what's important to him and where he got all this. Yeah. So when I sit down to write, I've got, and that might take 2 weeks to do that, but I've got everything he and I talked about in chronological order from youngest to oldest. Now, I'm not going to write the book chronologically, but I have my research that way so I know where things are. Mm-hmm. And also, as I read through that, and I do outline nonfiction books. I don't want to say that I'm a pantser when it comes to nonfiction. You have to know where you're going and what you're going to say. What it does is it reminds me of things I should have asked him, or things that he never quite finished the point because it reminded him of another story. So then I get back together with him, or I call him, or I email him, and I say, here's a hole, and here's, tell me more about this. And then as I write it, I'm sending him chapters at the same time, because one rule I have for doing as told to books like this is that I will write every word, because I'm not going to try to manage his ball team either. He shouldn't try to write a book. It's not his gift. But his name is on here as the author. And my name is on there as a with, which people know means I'm the writer. Or if they don't know, it's okay. But the point is, Mike Matheny owns this story. And I always say to him, don't ever think that I consider what I've written sacred, because you have full veto power over every word. If I use a phrase or a colloquialism that I might use and it's not him, that's a fail. And so I want it to sound like him. And so he would send back and say, I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say it this way, or I forgot to say about this, or I'll say, you never finished this point. He'll give me more. And then once we're both totally happy with the manuscript, we send it in. And this one was for Crown Archetype, which is a big publishing company in New York, and they were really happy with it, and it's done well. And in fact, they're holding off the paperback version of this until spring of 2017 because the hardback is still doing so well, which is really unusual and great. And the next project I want to do is fiction for kids. Kids won't respond, in essence, about what's right or wrong with youth sports. But if I make up a team and a player and a coach that are doing it wrong and then learn to do it right, that's the next deal that we'll be working on together.
Oh, that'll be wonderful, really, and much needed. And how long did that process take between you and Matheny?
I think we signed for that book somewhere before spring training, and then spring training is when it started. That's in February, and I think I delivered the book in October or so for a February release, which is fairly fast. They like to have more time than that, but they wanted to have a February release, during spring training the next year to take advantage of the interest in baseball. So it was a better part of a year to do that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is that the same with fiction? Does your fiction take that long?
It doesn't, and fiction I write only when I'm on deadline. That's what motivates me. So I get the deadline and I'm contracted and they want the book by a certain time. And I just go off to my writing cave. It's a pretty nice cave, but I call it the cave. And I put on the calendar the number of pages I need to write per day to make my deadline. And then about 7 or 10 days later, when I haven't written anything yet, I change the number of pages per day that I need to write. And people find it really encouraging because you talk about how many books I've written and how many I've sold and all that stuff. And so they think, well, you must be totally disciplined and not a procrastinator. I am a world-class procrastinator. In fact, I have a holder of a couple dozen pencils, and I can't write unless all those pencils are sharpened, which is really ridiculous because I don't write with pencils, and who does? Who's written with pencils in 6th grade, But my desk has to be neat, and I'm not a neat by trade. But all these things have to be done first. I used to agonize over that procrastination. And I finally realized that doesn't help either because then you lose sleep, you worry. And so I decided I'm going to schedule it. I'm going to put my page numbers in, but then know that I'm probably not going to start until here. But then I realized that during that procrastination time, my subconscious is working on the project too, and that helps. So I just don't sweat it. I just say, the one thing I do keep sacred, when I start writing the number of pages per day to make my deadline, and I'm here now, and those number of pages per day are getting higher than I'm comfortable with, I got to get to work because you can't get to here and go, oh, I can still make it. I've got 2 days and I've got 400 pages to write. That doesn't work. I'm a fast writer, but not that fast. So I allow myself to procrastinate. I don't fret over it. I schedule it, but I keep that deadline sacred because when I was a publisher, I realized that only 1 in 100 writers literally make their deadlines. They might, others may be a week or a month or, half a year, but if you just make your deadline, you're 1 in 100. And we talk about what the odds against getting published. That's one way to cut your odds by 1 in 100.
That's right. Yeah, I remember you saying that often. And it's so helpful to hear your process about, the number of pages. And there's some people who say, oh, I don't have a goal at all. I just sit down and do it. And I know I'm one that agonizes. Same thing. If my, kitchen is not clean or there's something out of place, then I have to fix it because otherwise my brain's going to be over there instead of here where it should be. So I totally relate to that. And I'm sure other people will relate as well.
And it's not stuff that's important either. It just feels like it has to be done. I mean, I've found myself reading the prescription bottles in the medicine cabinet to make sure we still, need these. And, why am I sorting that out now? Or reading the backs of cereal boxes. I haven't read this. I need to find out what's going on, in the cereal world,
That is so funny. You've given so much to new writers. I always say that with my glasses pulled down. To new writers, such as myself, that I appreciate so much. But why is it important to you to mentor Christian writers?
I've always I'm going to restock the pool. I mean, I realize I'm not going to be here forever, and a lot of my colleagues are similar ages, and we are in a whole new generation where young people are screen oriented. Everything is either on their phone or on their iPad or on their TV or at a movie. Everything is on the screen, and so they aren't meant to write the way they used to. But eventually they have to because all stuff has to be written at some point. Mm-hmm. And it may take different forms. It may be a different kind of writing than I'm used to, but there are certain rules and things that need to be followed. And I want to teach people. And I had some mentors when I was a kid. I became actually a professional writer when I was 14. I was writing for the local newspaper, writing sports stories. And even though it was very little money, not even enough to pay for you to get to the game, basically, but I was being paid, so I can say I was a professional for that that amount of time. I had people that would take my copy and say, "This isn't working, and here's why. And here's what you need to do." And then I was introduced to one of my idols, a writer that was doing the kind of things I wanted to do. He was writing biographies of sports heroes, and he was also writing marriage and family books and that type of thing. I don't think I was thinking about novel writing at that time. I was probably 15, but I wanted to be a writer like this guy, and I got to meet him, and he showed me his office, and he let me look through his bookshelves, and I remember thinking at that time, if I ever do succeed, and I knew the odds were against it, but if I ever succeed, I want to be this way to young writers. He was so generous with his time. He didn't rush me out of there, just give me an autograph and send me on my way. And I made a vow too, which I do have to say I regret to this day, but I still maintain it. I said, I will write back to everybody who contacts me.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
now, back then, I didn't know that there would be internet and email and all this stuff, or that I would have a phenomenon with the Left Behind series that would sell tens of millions of copies, and so people want to write. But I have personally answered everybody. I've never stopped to count how many that is, but it's still several a day, and it doesn't take long. I dash them out pretty quick, as you know, short and to the point. But I keep track of everybody that contacts me about my writing.
So, Jerry, you've written 189 books, I think is the last count, and you've sold tens of millions of copies of your book. But is there one book that you always wanted to write? And if there is, did you do it? And tell us about it.
Actually, there is. I had what I thought was a great idea for a novel, and it came right in the middle of the Left Behind series, so it was hard to work it in and find a publisher and convince people that it would work. But the novel is called Riven, and this is the, see if I can get out of the shadows there. Riven, and it comes from that term in the hymn about Christ's riven side. And then I show my mug on the back just for this one funny story. Whenever new books come in the mail, I get, before they're released, I get a box or two of books that come with my contract. And so my copies of Riven came. And what I like to do is, I haven't seen them at that point for the last 6 months or so, because the publisher's been doing their thing and getting ready for marketing and cataloging and all that stuff. So I haven't seen it for a while, and I'm on to something else. But if I've got a trip, I take one of the new books with me and read it as if I haven't read it before, just to see if it holds up. And usually that's encouraging to me because I feel good about it, and I was thrilled with how Riven came out. And so I had a trip scheduled, and Diana couldn't go with me, and so I took my novel, and at the last minute we found out she could come, so we got her ticket, but we couldn't sit together, and so she's a couple rows behind me on the plane, and I'm sitting there reading my book and enjoying it, and Diana's a couple rows back, and she said when the drink cart got back to her row, one of the flight attendants said to the other one, "There's a guy up there reading his own book." And she, of course, knew who that was and hid her face. But sometimes you just forget that your mug is on the back and that everybody's going to see you reading your own book with great glee.
Well, that was a wonderful book. I did read that book, and I remember one time I ran into Dallas. We were at a conference somewhere, and you were showing his What If movie. We're previewing it, and so Dallas was there, and he looked at me and he said, "So, have you read my dad's book, Riven?" And he had this look on his face. And I said, "Oh, yeah." And he goes, he didn't say anything. He just nodded his head with big wide eyes. And of course, we know why. And those who want to understand that comment will have to pick up a copy of Riven and read it. It's a wonderful book.
I said to the publisher that basically the very question you asked me, it was, is this, I said, this is the novel I've always wanted to write. So they put that on the back. This is the novel I've always wanted to write. It is unlike anything I've ever written. And needless to say, that puts me behind the eight ball for everything in the future. What is this one then? A book you sort of always wanted to write, or you wrote because you do, or whatever. But it still holds up, and as you know, Dallas is still trying to get a movie made of this too. So when that day comes, I'm going to be thrilled because it is very close to me.
Yeah, well, I hope I get an invitation. I have an autographed copy of that book right there somewhere on that shelf. Anyway, so if there was, an award that was to be given to writers in your name, what would you want that award to signify or to stand for?
It's interesting you asked that because there are awards in my name that go to writing. Taylor University has a Jerry Jenkins scholarship, and that goes to freshmen who show real promise. And my buddy Doc Hensley, who runs the program there, evaluates them, and I guess he has a staff that does that too. And then they decide who has the most potential, and so they get a little stipend from this scholarship that I finance there. And every year I get a really nice letter from whoever gets that, and they talk about that they're honored and that they're going to do their best. And some have gone on to great things. One guy won a novel contest against all the university students in the country who wanted to enter this contest. And most of them, I think 9 of the top 10 were places like Stanford or Ivy League. And this guy from Taylor University won the whole thing.
That's
And
wonderful.
a big contract in New York and everything. That's great. And then at Moody Bible Institute, where I worked for 30 years and have been on the board for about 15 or 16, we have an annual writing contest, and I help judge that, and it's for short things. But the students write on a specific subject we give them, and we see who writes the best and who does it anecdotally and doesn't try to make a sermon out of it and that type of thing. So those are things that they're sort of awards that do have my name on them, and basically they're for young people that really want to make a career of writing and a ministry of writing.
That's awesome. I love it. I didn't know that, but I'm glad to learn it. You also said that I asked you a couple of questions for the Author Essentials page that I'll post later on this month. And I asked you what was one of your favorite things, whatever it is. And you said you had something to share with me.
Yeah, it's sort of an unusual question that I don't often get asked, but one of my favorite things is a ring I bought, and I'm going to see if I can hold it up to the camera so you can see the cross on there. Okay. And the big thing about this ring, if I can get it off, is that it's flexible. It's like a, like a chain.
Wow.
And I was buying a gift for Diana for I don't even remember if it was a birthday or an anniversary, but I was in a jewelry store and picking out something for her, and I saw this ring, and I kept setting it, and the girl there said, "Well, you want to try it on?" And I tried it on, and it fit. And so it's got some good bulk to it, and it's got the cross, and it's black with the silver, and I just loved it, and it fits nice. And people comment on it all the time because it stands out. It's bigger than normal ring. And then, of course, they want to know about the cross. Some people say, does that mean anything, or is it just a design? Of course, it gives me a chance to say that it means something to me. But I remember saying that day, I was going to buy a gift at this store, but now I'm going to buy 2 gifts, and one of them's for me. And Diana and I can't even remember what it was I bought her, but we still remember this ring.
One of the things I love most about you is that you have a completely funny sense of humor, dry sense of humor, but you also have a very tender heart. And I just have appreciated knowing you, and I hope to know you for many years to come. And I hope to see you comment on one of my books if it ever gets published. That would be amazing. So,
well, we're looking forward to that, and you've been at it long enough to be just about getting there. So I'll be looking forward to seeing it.
I hope so. I hope so. Anyway, anything else that we should talk about today before I let you go?
I think we've covered the waterfront, but it's always great to talk to you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I hope that, did you mention the Jerry B. Jenkins or the Jerry Jenkins Guild? Did you talk about that?
Yeah, we didn't specify that, but I do teach writers online at jerryjenkins.com and jerrysguild.com. It's JERRYSGUILD.com. And we hold registration windows open every few months for that. And so I think the next one is going to be in late September. And we have over 1,500 students now and room for more. All kinds of features on there. But the free part is just jerryjenkins.com, where my writing blog is there and some things you can download. So if you want to learn to write and want to do it along with us, check that out.
Yes, I'm definitely going to feature your blog, because there's one specific blog, I just read it recently, as a matter of fact, that has a bunch of writing tips on it that are super useful: omit needless words, resist the urge to explain, etc. But every time I know for myself, every time I'm writing something, I'll look at it and I'll go, would Jerry tell me to cut that? Yeah, he would, So you're definitely an influence in my life. And thank you so much for meeting with me today. I, again, have loved reading The Valley of the Dry Bones, and I'll be excited to see what comes next with that fiction for young people. And I hope you guys have enjoyed Jerry as much as I, and be sure to check the website for more tips and a wonderful blog and his guild. All right, have a great day.